Well, thank you for joining everybody. My name is Ken Kerry, and this is our Thought Leader Thursday webinar series. And I'll keep this brief, but I wanted to talk a little bit about why we're putting together this webinar, specifically about electric vehicles. A couple of reasons. One is there's a lot of players in the space today. And with a lot of players, there has to be a lot of differentiation. And the problem is, from my perspective, I don't see it. So I wanted to interview somebody who has been in the electric vehicle space as a chief marketing officer, Tony Besasie, that you'll see that interview. And, I wanted to discuss with him what he's seeing in the space. What are the challenges of the electric vehicle business and the companies within it? And specifically, another impetus with this is if you were watching the Super Bowl this year, you saw that GM made a huge push in the electrical vehicle space with great branding ads. And I want to talk a little bit about that probably on the back side of this and where I think there's a use for that and where I think there's a huge opportunity for a lot of other companies. So we talked a little bit about a lot of the different kinds of electric vehicle companies, whether they are subscription-based, which is interesting, whether they're Chinese manufacturers, whether they're US manufacturers, or whether they're the manufacturers that are coming into the market today to take on the big guy Tesla, like Lucid and Fisker. I mean, those are huge competitors. And most recently, if you've been watching business news and seeing the stock for Lucid has been taking a little bit of a hit. A lot of it has to do with, now that they have a wonderful vehicle, the Air, what's next? When that is going to take place. In other words, until they deliver on a vehicle and until there's consumer confidence in that vehicle, that stock isn't going to do anything until start people grasping and attracting themselves to it, because everybody is chasing Tesla and they're putting billions of dollars into new facilities, and that's just one company. So anyways, we're going to get right into that interview with Tony right now. But anyway, so I just want to give you an idea of why we're doing this, and specifically, what are the challenges that these electric vehicle companies have, and how can they maximize marketing when there's a lot of investment in this category. Sooner or later, there's got to be sales. And without sales, all these investments, they don't mean anything. I mean, how long can they survive without selling products? And we're going to talk about how you can differentiate, how you can sell a little bit differently on top of your brand and equity. And because at the end of the day, it's consumer confidence. Somebody has to understand why your product is better, what's in it for them, and how is it going to affect their lives? And because going to an electric vehicle affects your life in so many different ways, that is going to be the next step. But who's going to be the next player, and how are they going to sell their vehicles differently than next guy to take that piece of the pie? So with no further ado, let's start and we have a poll question here. So the poll question is this: how many people within, I'd say, the next year to 2 years are planning on buying an electric vehicle, or being in consideration in terms of, I might even consider it, I'm going to do it. And, I'd like to see those types of numbers, because they're talking about, when I talk about they, specifically the CEO of Volkswagen, he said that it's going to be a monumental shift in the next 10 years, and most companies are going to be all electric at that point. So that consideration and this in a poll question is of interest to me, because it gives me an idea of how we can dig into this category even deeper, and hopefully bring some benefit to everybody watching. So, all right, let's check it out. All right, so I want to welcome Tony Besasie to our webinar series, Thought Leader Thursdays. And I know Tony from a former life for him in the direct-to-consumer business as an executive at a media company. And Tony has moved on to the electrical vehicle business, so he has a lot of experience and expertise there. But what's unique with Tony is that he has expertise and experience in both marketing and EV, especially as the CMO at that company. So Tony, tell me a little bit about what you did at Rev Group, what Rev Group is, and kind of your insights on just the potential in the electric vehicle market.
Sure. So I was the CMO of Rev Group. Rev is a collection of specialty vehicles. They manufacture everything from fire trucks, fire apparatus, to ambulances, transit buses, school buses, and recreation vehicles. And in my role there, I was the chief marketing officer overseeing all of those brands, about 27 different brands, a collection of different vehicle types. So it's exciting business, and within the Rev Group, we did have some electric vehicle platforms, primarily in our transit bus and in our school bus businesses.
What is keeping these CMOs up at night, and how do you communicate to the consumer about it to stand out based on from your experience as a CMO?
Yeah, I think that there's two major worries of a CMO in the EV space.
Okay.
And they're related. The first is brand choice. How do I become the choice of the consumers? Because there are going to be many options, particularly when you see what GM is doing and the number of vehicles. They're going to launch 30 new brands in the next 5 years.
Wow.
EV platforms. You've got Volvo out there with their Polestar brand. You've got the Chinese manufacturers that they may penetrate the United States, but they're certainly going to penetrate the rest of the world. I'll guarantee you that.
Right.
So you have all of these options that are out there, plus Tesla, plus Ford, plus,
Yeah.
And I think to be the, the brand of choice is one of the major kind of challenges for a CMO today. Mm-hmm. And the second is scaling quickly. Tesla has an advantage. They're first to market at scale. They weren't first to market in the EV space, but they're certainly first to market in scale. I think that they just delivered their 200th vehicle this year, 200,000th vehicle.
Right.
Well, they certainly have, a head start in this race.
Right.
And it is a race. It's almost a space race, right?
Yeah.
So you've got these startups, very creative, highly innovative. Many of them are fairly well capitalized.
Yep.
Good money behind them. But it takes a lot of money to certainly build and manufacture a quality product. Technology is accelerating at a very fast rate. So even what you build today, you're already working on, what the next iteration is going to be, for the next few years. And then you have to market that. You have to sell it. You have to service it. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's going to take a lot of money. There's some startups that are out there that are really innovative. Mm-hmm. And if I was the CMO of one of those startups, it would be, how fast can I move? How quickly can I scale, get vehicles in consumers' hands, build advocacy, build a community around my vehicle? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's what Tesla has.
Yes.
The Tesla has built a community around their vehicles. And there's some cracks in the veneer on Tesla now too, because there's a bit of hubris that comes along with Tesla, that some people are just don't want to participate in that community.
Right.
And I think that that's an opportunity for other brands to step in. But certainly you need to get these vehicles in the hands of consumers. They need to see them, feel them, touch them, drive them, experience them, and then advocate for them, because it is about, the automotive industry is a scale business.
Right.
You can be a niche player, but that's for the space of, it's rarefied air. That's Lamborghinis and Ferraris.
Exactly.
Right. If you're going to be in the EV, and there will be EV exotic supercars, there already are. But if you're going to be in the mainstream vehicle market, you need to scale.
It sets up my next question, Tony, and a topic that I think would be really interesting because, you said you have to scale, you have to sell cars, and you have to start making money. I mean, this investment just doesn't keep coming and coming. You need to show traction. So that comes to my point about what is the opportunity for EV companies about standing out and showing, getting the consumers to adapt. And I think it's really about adaptation. You're taking a consumer who is a combustion engine brand loyal person, in most cases, I'm making a generalization, and you're getting them to move over to electrical. Now, if you're not an early adopter, that's a difficult task, right? That's a huge, difficult task. In addition to that, consumer confidence is one of the big things that they're going to have to overcome to sell cars. I mean, you've got to get people to believe that you have the right technology, you have the right support. What's going to happen when I buy a car? Because that model is totally different now. And if I'm going to invest that much money in a vehicle, I need to know all these things. So how big of an issue is consumer confidence? Because, brand is one thing, but consumer confidence to say, I'm going to go from this to this, and I feel like I'm going to be taken care of every step of the way.
I think that is one of the, if not the largest obstacle to overcome in the beginning. And I think it's also two layered, right? Mm-hmm. So the first layer is now the right time for me to be buying an electric vehicle? Okay. Has the technology matured enough for me to be able to commit my next purchase or my next lease as an EV? Mm-hmm. And is that EV going to become immediately obsolete because of new technology, right? So Think about it like computers or smartphones back then. You need to understand when when is the market matured enough, when's the technology matured enough for me to kind of jump in. Among other than those early adopters who are just naturally going to jump in because they wanted to be first. So first, they have to have confidence in electric vehicles and the platform and technology.
Yep.
And then after that, it is now which brand? Which brand is the right brand for me? And within those brands, every one of them has a different technology. So now you have to compare, this battery technology, this one is, lithium ion, battery pack. This one is, not using nickel. This one is, so there's all these different technologies. There's all these different designs. So now you have to start making these brand choices. So I think what's going to be critical is education. You're going to have to take the time to educate the consumer. And as a brand, not only do you have to educate them on your brand, you probably have to do a little heavy lifting and help them educate on the category, right?
Yes.
Like, build confidence in the category and build confidence in your brand. Mm-hmm. So I think education is going to be a significant piece of this transformation that's going to take place in the EV space.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, Tony, everybody's making a good EV car. It's not like people aren't making good stuff. Everybody's making a good car. To your point, what's the platform? That's a whole nother thing. But education, and this fits into the marketing. And from our background as marketers and direct-to-consumer marketers, how do you believe a direct-to-consumer model can help these companies? And of course, this is our opinion, but we're trying to crack a marketing mold, if you will, of it's not just a 30-second commercial when you can say I'm Ford, because nobody knows who these other companies are. So that doesn't work, if you will. You have to educate, you have to demonstrate, you have to get them comfortable. And how do you do that in 30 seconds? Is that possible? Is there enough money for these businesses to do that? I mean, you got to get people coming in and so educated that I want to go to that studio and this is the car I want versus, trying to win on brand, because that's going to be very difficult, don't you think?
I do. For the for any automotive manufacturer, particularly the traditional ones in their existing distribution system with dealers in that equation, I think that that's an advantage to them, but it's also a disadvantage to them. And one of the things that they're going to have to do is re-educate their entire sales staff to make sure that they're on board with EV, educated, but also proactively selling, the EV as a solution.
Right.
I do think it's going to take a lot of money to educate and to generate awareness. The funnel hasn't changed in marketing. You still need to generate that awareness. That 30-second plays a role, but it can't just be a 30-second TV spot. That's going to drive brand awareness. It's going to drive interest, but we need to push those individuals, or the automotive manufacturers need to push those individuals all the way through the funnel down to a transaction, either a lease or a purchase. Mm-hmm. And what COVID has taught us is the direct-to-consumer model is a very good model.
Yes, it works.
It works. You and I, from our old days, probably could, have shared some of our insights into a DTC model and the benefits of those. But I think COVID has kind of convince the rest of the world that
it accelerated what was going to happen in the future anyways. It just accelerated it.
It certainly did. And I think that's the other interesting thing that we're going to see here in the divide in the automotive space is you're going to have the conventional automotive manufacturers, the GMs, the Fords, the Chryslers, the VWs, and the Volvos. They're going to go through a dealer network.
Yeah.
Because they have a dealer network, and those are their business partners, and they're established there.
Yep.
And now you have all these other new EV entrants in the marketplace, and they're going to go direct consumer. And I think the one that's really interesting to me is Canoo, because their business model is a subscription business model.
Right.
You never own the car; you just subscribe to it, and there's no fees attached, so there's no entrance fee,
right,
and there's no exit fee.
Right.
You pay on a monthly basis or a 6 month. Clearly, they'd like you to stay in it for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. But I think what Canoo's going to do as a service to the rest of the industry is they're going to get a lot of people interested in trying an EV vehicle, because if they lower that barrier of entry,
right,
for a commitment to try a brand like Canoo,
right,
and I think it's smart for Canoo too, because we were talking about being the first into the market and getting scale, and I think that you're going to see Canoo, you're going to see a lot of early adopters. They're direct to consumer, they're subscription based, so now you got to go communicate that, right, because that is not what people know about,
right?
They've never, EV, subscription-based, direct-to-consumer. I mean, that is a lot to consume as a consumer, to digest and to be able to make a decision off of that. So you're going to have to take the time to educate, to inform, to engage. There's to create a trust with those consumers. There's a lot of heavy lifting that's going to have to take place here.
And that's where direct-to-consumer really shines, because there's really two big things you're trying to accomplish: consumer confidence, and then the features and benefits of the vehicle. And that's a big story to tell. And that's why I think direct-to-consumer makes so much sense when it comes to a marketing and advertising platform, because you can zero in on your markets, you can take the time to tell the story. You can come up with all different variations. You can be on TV, you can be on digital, social, OTT, all that stuff. And you have this one coherent message, and it's just so difficult. You just can't do all that in 30 seconds. Now, maybe there's some, Madison Avenue whiz-bang who think they can do that. But that's an expensive thing to be doing. Not only the expense of building the vehicle, but the expense of marketing it. Oh my goodness! If you're going to go that direction where direct to consumer is, I'm going to educate that consumer, and I'm going to basically be able to tell how much did I spend to get that customer into my funnel. That now is my job to sell them or convince them that I'm the brand for them. And now you're really talking about accountability dollars, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think along with direct to consumer, the application of those in the EV space is really about lead nurturing.
Yes.
So you're going to be bringing in an interested party and keeping that lead and maturing that lead all the way through the cycle is going to take a lot of touches, and it's going to take different touches as well. And you're going to need to feed those customers, those prospects, information in the fashion that they want to receive it, and responding to each one of their questions along that path. And I think that that's direct to consumer marketing, right?
Right. So, like in the encyclopedia, you just said it,
right,
Tony.
Right. So I think that the DTC model is kind of properly aligned with what's happening in the EV space for these new marketers.
Yeah.
These new products that are coming into the marketplace. It'll be interesting to see what the traditional automotive manufacturers do. I think that they've done a tremendous job at nurturing leads. I mean, the Detroit automotive space has done a really good job of generating leads online and being able to nurture that. They're very sophisticated and they have a lot of people behind it. And then they hand that lead off to the dealer.
And that's where it breaks.
Right. Yeah. And that's where some of the uncertainty happens. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that having that lead, within your own control, and being able to nurture that lead all the way through the maturity is going to be critical as you're educating individuals, engaging and building trust, and hopefully, converting that into a transaction.
Which goes back to your very beginning point about creating that relationship and having that community. It all starts with that educated consumer and how you treat them, and now you create that community, and then you have brand loyalists, right?
Yeah.
Like a Tesla person. They're a brand loyalist. I mean, it's very difficult to get somebody off that mountain, right? Once they're there. So all these other businesses and all these other companies have that challenge to, scale that mountain with them, and they got to go about it differently because, like I said, everyone's making a good EV car, but how are you going to how do I know that when I purchase this car, that where am I going to get it serviced? How am I going to recharge it? What are all these things going to do? Because if that's not clear in my head, how do I even make that leap? So that's a big story. And then you have these unbelievable sedans like the Lucid Air. I mean, these are $150,000 vehicles that are absolutely gorgeous, and they have more capacity than a Tesla. If you look at
1,000 horsepower.
Yeah,
a car, a sedan with 1,000 horsepower.
Right.
Yeah.
A four-door sedan with 1,000 horsepower and the ability to go long distances, longer than a Tesla. I mean, those things are huge benefits. But what they're talking about is they have studios, and they call them studios. And you go to the studio and you look at the vehicle, or maybe not, and you get online and you can build your car and all that kind of stuff. But how do I get that person to the studio to ask more questions? How do I get that person online to see that experience? That's where the direct-to-consumer model comes in, right?
Yes, I think many of the first touches and engagements are going to happen online. That's where people are going to discover these, and that might happen through social.
Right, but you got to get them there.
Got to drive them to some location where they have to experience the vehicle themselves.
They got to know you exist.
And many of these vehicles, I think that's the other thing that's going to take place here. Many of the vehicles that are in the EV space right now are expensive. They're $75,000. As you start adding the upgrades, if you want autonomous driving, which is, by the way, a great feature, that's $10,000. But these cars are going to be over the $100,000 limit easily. And I think what you're going to see is many of these new vehicles that are going to come to market, they're all trying to be hit a price point under $40,000.
Right.
I think the Tesla Cybertruck was like $30-some thousand when Elon Musk mentioned it. And you're seeing more effort being put in different vehicles for different price points, for different uses, pickups, SUVs, sports cars, sedans. So the choices are going to expand. I think that right now for those high-end price point vehicles, those individuals are discriminating buyers. They're going to want to experience that car. They're going to want to see it. They need to go to a location. You need to drive into that location. I think there's going to be a lot of touches. They're taking deposits right now, $1,000 refundable. That's kind of easy money to take right now, right? I reserve my car. Brilliant, by the way. It's a great lead gen source. And I think that you're going to see a real maturation within marketing take place over the next year among these new kind of burgeoning electric vehicle manufacturers.
It's interesting that when you talk about price point, and price point is scale. I mean, Henry Ford, right? He figured that out, right? So we're almost to that area where Fiskars, they totally flipped. Now they have a very affordable vehicle, the Ocean. They said, okay, they had a sedan that was very expensive and beautiful, and then a lot of people bought it, but not as many. And they've totally flipped their business model to get to the scalability, right?
Absolutely. This is really about the democratization of electric vehicles. It's not about the early adopters or the elite to say that you have an EV. This is really about giving EV to the masses. I think Ford is playing an F-150 electric vehicle. Ford's the number one selling vehicle, in the United States. 800,000 vehicles or something a year. So when you start seeing, these mainstream vehicles start going EV, and you see the price points come down on many of these other EV models. I think there's going to be a lot of shopping going on, a lot of price comparing, a lot of feature comparing, a lot of interest in whether this company is going to be around 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So building brand trust is going to be important. I think that it's going to be, particularly in the direct-to-consumer model, I think the operative word there is respect. Each one of these companies need to respect their customer and or their prospect and make sure that they're engaging them and being responsive to them, answering their questions. So this is a really exciting time for the automotive industry and for the EV industry. And I think it's going to require a lot of marketing and a lot of manufacturing.
Right. And, it was interesting that Herbert Diess, the CEO of VW, said, it's really about mindset, the mindset of these businesses. It's technology is not the biggest challenge. It's the mindset of the people, and the reluctance to radical change forces them to change, right? You either on board, like you said, and we're doing this, or you are forced to change because your mindset is differently. And when you're forced to change, you have a problem because now you're playing catch up. And I just thought that was a very, very interesting quote from him because, as I was saying earlier, they've poured $50 billion into developing EV at VW, and they got it wrong. It was a software issue, but they're $50 billion into it. So there's not a lot of wiggle room, So getting that consumer as educated as possible, all those touch points, that relationship and getting them comfortable is really the game, right? It's really the game that is going to change the way automobiles are sold because the automobile is totally different today.
Yeah, that's a great quote, by the way. I'll have to you have to send that to me. I think that I'd love to see that. I think making sure that the product that you put out there is well tested, well vetted, and I think that they are the manufacturers that are out there. They're with maybe respect to VW. They are going through their paces. They're doing their alpha, the beta, and the gamma testing. Making sure that the product is right. And so much can go wrong. It could be technology. It could be software. It could be mechanical. It could be the power units. So there's a lot of complexity and the probability of one thing going wrong does exist. I think the other piece to this is the community of existing buyers that are out there And I think that once these brands have the opportunity to build communities, I think about really good brand communities that are out there now. Jeep is a great brand that has a great brand community around it, right?
Absolutely.
People get to personalize their vehicles. They, there's the Jeep wave that everybody talks about when you see another Jeep driver, and I think that Jeep customers kind of support other Jeep customers in forums and at rallies and just in general. And I think that each one of these brands that are coming to market, they have that opportunity, and I think that support system is going to be needed. Yeah. Because not everything is going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And I think getting it right, getting the product right is important, but I also think getting that customer relationship is right and important as well.
And that goes back to one of the big pain points that because I know, because I've spoken to a couple of CMOs at EV companies, one of the biggest things is, how do I get people comfortable with that point of owning an EV car, and what's that process, to your point, Tony? And it's like, people are asking, how am I going to be supported throughout the entire car ownership? What's the information I'm going to get to even get there? And since there's no dealerships in some of these companies, how is service going to be handled? When I have questions about the vehicle, who do I connect with? So that education to get me comfortable is the first step, and then here's our car, it's really great and fantastic, and let's make it affordable for you or whatever. That's almost second tier, because I want to just fill you in a little conversation I had with an executive of Volvo when we were talking about, what's the biggest challenge? And he said, by far, unequivocally, it's about getting people comfortable. And I said, well, how are you guys going about it? Now, Volvo is doing something really interesting. They have onboard concierge. So if you have any question, you're talking to somebody right then and there live in your vehicle. They're going to be delivering a test drive right to your house. You're going to be able to pull it up on your phone. They already have relationships with Amazon Prime, where Amazon Prime is going to deliver something in your vehicle. So it's that whole relationship. It's that whole ecosystem that's so different, and that it's just a game changer. And it goes back to, how do you communicate all of that to get somebody into the funnel, to nurture them, to turn them into a customer, then turn them into a brand loyalist, and then create a movement like Tesla, and then make it a sustainable business?
What Volvo is doing is spot on. They need to continue to engage with that consumer. So from the beginning of educating them, engaging them and educating them, but also nurturing them, and then the aftermarket service. There may be a lot of first-time buyers that are going to try these new EV vehicles, and it's going to be important to get them comfortable with these vehicles. I think that that's actually one of the advantages that the traditional automotive manufacturers have. People know of Ford, they know of GM, they know of Volvo, they know there's those brands, they trust those brands, they probably Toyota, they have those brands in their garage. I think for a lot of the newer market entrants, they're going to have to really make sure that they're building that kind of confidence in the consumer, that they have not only a superior product and one that fits that consumer's needs, but one that has longevity to it, a brand that has longevity to it, and that they're going to service them after the sale.
Right. And it's only taken Tesla 10 years to do that.
Right.
That's all.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
They had a lot of money.
And a lot of money. What's interesting is, when it comes to the value that we want to give in this webinar, the things to be thinking about if you're an executive at an EV company, if you're an executive in any type of business that's selling or looking to do direct to consumer, or is being, or doing it already, or is going to be forced to do it, which I think a lot of people are going to be doing it. So I kind of broke down the advantages and disadvantages, and you kind of hit on them. Can you see Ford being as technologically advanced as Tesla? That's a big question. I mean, the average person may not. Do I believe they can be that way? So that's a big challenge they have to educate that they can make that leap from combustion to electrical, and they have the technology know-how. And part of the technology is, as you know, an EV car is just as much software as it is hardware. In fact, I'd say there's even more software in an EV car than hardware.
Yeah.
What do you think about those?
Absolutely.
What do you think about those points in terms of disadvantages and things that they have to look at as from a marketing perspective?
Well, I think it's no secret that the large automotive manufacturers do have bureaucracy within their organization, and being able to move fast is not one of their advantages as compared to the startups that are out there. As I mentioned before, first to market is key. Mm-hmm. That's what Tesla was able to gain. Mm-hmm. And I think that there are other opportunities out there. You certainly don't want to be the last to market in the EV space, particularly if you're a startup. You're going to miss the boat on that one.
Yeah.
So I think that the big automotive manufacturers do have to think about how quickly they can move.
Right.
Will they get the and they have to get it right, by the way.
Yeah.
They can't have a failure. Right.
You can't have a Volt.
No, right?
Right?
Yeah, so not today. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, you could have this vehicle that you tried and it didn't work out so well, and you kind of buried it and put it behind you, and the world moved on. But today you're going to be seen, you're going to be exposed for not getting it right when everybody else is.
Yeah.
So I think that it's going to be important that they get it right. I think that it's important that they move fast. They do have the ability of having brand loyalty and brand trust.
Absolutely.
Among them.
Yeah.
I don't know yet if the dealer network is going to be an advantage to them or a disadvantage. I can see arguments to both.
Yep.
I think part of their challenge is going to be able to get the dealers over the hump.
Yep. And that's part of that mindset. That's part of that mindset that
Absolutely.
the CEO of Volkswagen was saying. It's that mindset everybody has to. Because I've heard that over and over again, not from just an executive like yourself, Tony, but from other executives in EV companies where they're saying, this dealership thing has to deliver. It has to deliver.
They have to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And I think I read somewhere that there were several Cadillac dealers that decided not to go forward as a Cadillac dealer because they didn't want to put the capital in to changing their service base to service these new EVs. They said, no, I'm out.
Yep.
And I think GM is very happy with that. They're like, okay, if you're not on board and you're not moving forward, let's part ways. So
in 10 years you will be out, or you're going to be or you're going to be the place to service the old school car.
Right. The technology is an interesting one. I do think that the big auto manufacturers have the ability to either advance the technology or buy the technology. GM has got their new battery that apparently is revolutionary compared to everything else, compared to Tesla. Everything gets compared to Tesla. Mm-hmm. But you're also seeing other plays. So Ford is a major investor in Rivian. Mm-hmm. General Motors is a major investor in Waymo, which is the autonomous driving vehicle that Google has. So you're seeing some strategic partnerships that are taking place among at least GM and Ford, and with technology companies and with battery companies. So I think that they'll either develop it or they'll go buy it.
Right.
So I think they'll be fine in that area. It's really for them, it's about how fast can they move. Yeah.
And you mentioned to me, wait till Apple gets into the game.
Right.
Talk about technology, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, any one of those startups could, whoever scales the best and has some traction could be the next Apple car. Right? Because if Apple wants to get into the business, all they need to do is go, like they could have bought Tesla, apparently, according to Elon Musk.
Right.
But there are plenty of other vehicles out there to choose from now. Right. Other vehicle manufacturers to choose from if these guys get the traction. Apple could be buying one of them.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I wanted to bring this up, and just on the dealership thing. This is not an opinion. This is exactly what I went through. My wife was looking for a new car. We went to a Porsche dealership because she's had one for, last 15 years. So we were going to update that. The new electric Porsche is on the showroom. Beautiful. And I have to tell you, Tony, I was so disappointed. There was no difference between buying a $100,000 plus Porsche electric vehicle than it was buying an entry-level Cayman. And that's where it broke for me. I'm like, I don't know. Convince me that I can go somewhere at a distance and recharged.
Right.
I just wasn't. It was very interesting, and it's a reputable dealer, but that was the deal breaker for me. I was ready to pull the trigger, but I had no confidence that I was going to get anywhere after dropping that kind of money.
Well, I think you're touching on another level of confidence. There's confidence in the brand, but there's also confidence in the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So if you're, I live in the Midwest, as you know, there's long distances in between things here.
A lot of corn.
A lot of corn, a lot of wheat, a lot of space. So, is there going to be an infrastructure that's going to enable you? Plus, living in the Midwest, we also deal with the cold, which, depletes battery life. So there are a lot of other things that are going to need to be addressed in order to get kind of the masses over into the EV. What I've been seeing and hearing is that right now the EV space is really coastal. It's the West Coast, your neck of the woods, and also on the East Coast, down into the Southeast. Midwest will probably be the last, but that's not where the population is anyway.
Right.
It is in that kind of coastal and then down into the South Central area. So, that infrastructure is growing, but it has a long way to grow as well. So there's building confidence in vehicles, but building confidence in the network and in the support network that goes with it. This is going to require a lot of communication, a lot of marketing, a lot of trust building.
I think the big part of it is they have the opportunity to have disruptive marketing strategies like direct to consumer, and they're already doing it with studios, and it all comes back to educating, informing, make me feel comfortable, do that in a message that gets a lead, you nurture that lead, you turn them into a sale, and eventually what we talk about is lifetime value. How do I get them into the next vehicle, And that's and it all starts with educating that consumer on a totally different way of thinking about the automobile.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that really is kind of the fundamental principles of direct-to-consumer marketing. And this is going to require very smart investments, marketing investments, and making sure that you know where to place that money, what messaging to have at what time, who to talk to, how to segment your customers, all the things that are just kind of common practice within direct-to-consumer. That now needs to be applied to these very expensive, right now expensive electric vehicles. And being cost effective with your dollars is going to be very critical as these companies continue into this journey.
And that's where direct to consumer really shines. It's like you hear these conversations, and Tony, you and I have heard these conversations over. We need to do this, we need to do that. So it's like common knowledge, but it's not common practice. Now it's going to have to be common practice if you're going to survive, because you have a window, and the money is not grown from trees.
Yeah, right. It's market capitalization of Tesla still kind of throws me off.
Who knows?
Eventually, so some rationalization will have to take place within the industry, and I think that wise investment in manufacturing, in supply chain, and in sales and in marketing is going to be required. They're going to have to do this at every level, because this is not an easy undertaking.
Yep. Get me comfortable, and then sell me your car.
Yeah.
Tony, I want to thank you. I really, really appreciate your knowledge, not only as a direct-to-consumer marketer, but as an executive in the vehicle and electric vehicle business, and what you brought to this webinar. I really appreciate it because, we're going to have a lot of executives gleaning information from this. And when they do, how could people get a hold of you, Tony? If they have questions or, just want to have a conversation, how would people get a hold of you? What's your preferred way to get in touch?
Well, like everybody else, I'm on social media. So
Okay.
LinkedIn is probably a great place for me, from a professional perspective.
Yep.
Facebook, LinkedIn is a great place. I'm not much of a Twitter individual.
Right.
Don't have the time for Twitter, but I would say just connecting with me via LinkedIn. I'm out there all the time and
Yep.
would love to connect with individuals.
Again, thank you very much, and I'm really happy to have this opportunity, and most importantly, I'm really happy to add for you the value you've given to the people on this webinar is invaluable, and having 60 minutes of Tony's time is almost priceless, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you again, Tony.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Ken.
All right, so that was my interview with Tony Besasie. That was really, really interesting, and talking specifically about the electric vehicle market, and then how they are going to have to differentiate themselves. And really what it comes down to when it comes to direct-to-consumer marketing for this category is, what is it that you're offering? Why is it better than competition? What are the features and benefits that make a difference to me? And because there's so many great companies out there and so many great products, how are you going to tell that story? Is that going to happen in a 30-second ad? As Tony said, that could be part of it, but there's a bigger question to answer. And through the data and research that is fact, is that consumer confidence is the biggest issue for the majority of the potential audience. There are the early adapters, but there's everybody else. And that consumer confidence has to be dealt with. And one of the best ways to do that is communicating with them directly, talking about all the features and benefits, giving them reasons to believe that your product or service or your product is the best answer for them. And how does it compare to the other products? And then once I've been educated there through an advertisement, I can go online, get more information, get deeper, and then you can see the commitment level of that consumer. But if they're just searching around, it's going to be very difficult to differentiate your product, an electrical vehicle product, from the other person when you're just searching around. And you can absolutely streamline that learning curve through direct to consumer, and that's where we're trying to get to. Is that it's a great opportunity, and like we said in the webinar, there's so many aspects to this, and brand and equity is absolutely critical, but direct to consumer is a way to really take that to the next level, because an EV company is a direct to consumer business. So how do you market to that category? And there's a whole different strategy to go and tactics to do that. That's what's really, at the end of the day, in an exciting category like electric vehicles, there's such unique ways to advertise, and which is one of the interesting things that he said is that in the promotion of this is that electric vehicles are the future. Is your advertising up to that? And I hope we brought some light into that. So before we go off here, there's a couple of questions that came in that I want to answer specifically that I did say we'll get back to you after the live event. And one of them comes from Regina, and she says, has a marketing strategy like this been used before for traditional vehicles? And absolutely it has. So, several years ago, we did a campaign for GM, and they were talking about a specific model of vehicle. And there were very different price points with that vehicle. And one of the things that we did in the commercial, and this was a 2-minute and a 30-minute commercial, that we were able to walk through, first of all, the amazing benefits of this vehicle, and because it was an entry level, price sensitive vehicle that could all the way go up to a convertible. But when you get into that, what you get for this price point, what you get for that price point, and you walk the consumer through it into this commercial, first of all, you learn about the brand, you learn about the car, but then you think about all your features and benefits. So when you get to the dealership, you have a really good idea of what you want, what you're willing to spend, and you're not wasting time going through inventory and the things that happens at a dealership where so many people get frustrated. So it was learning, it was streamlining that education aspect to it, and that was done several years ago. It was very successful for them. So yes, it's been done before, but now when you talk about electric vehicles, it's more sophisticated, and it goes back to the point of there is data that says it's not just the vehicle, it's the consumer confidence first, that when I buy this vehicle, I'm going to be taken care of. I know what to do. I know the limitations. I know what's going to happen. So when I drive off the lot with that vehicle, I have a real good expectation, and you've given me the confidence that you as an infrastructure are going to deal with me as a consumer. Then I will make a decision on what electric vehicle I want and at what price point I want to pay. Because as we said in the webinar, they're making great cars. That's not the issue. It's getting somebody from combustion to electrical, feeling comfortable. And there's a short window to do that, because there are mandates, as we all know, that these combustion engine big manufacturers have got to go to electrical vehicles. So just making an electrical vehicle is one thing, getting consumers comfortable to do that, so when it's time, they're ready. That's a whole education process that takes time, but it can be done directly to the consumer in every touch point that they're at. So that's one of the wonderful benefits of it. So next one is, who in the electrical vehicle category do you think is doing a good job in their marketing right now? Well, I'd have to say, from a top level, I think GM is doing a good job. And then at the same time, I'm a little perplexed. So I think we've all seen the commercials with GM, and they talk about this skateboard platform for their electrical vehicle. And they're just saying this is the future. And they're talking about, within the commercial, they're talking about young kids saying, I want something for me. You know, a younger, maybe a little bit older, maybe in their young 20s, I want something for me. Someone in the 30s, 40s, and so on, talk about make a vehicle for me. And they're obviously talking about electrical vehicle, because you don't see an outline of a car. All you see is the skateboard platform. So I think they're mining the customers really well, because earlier this year, GM made a huge announcement at the CES show that there's going to be numerous models available in the electric vehicle category under GM. Think about that for a second. They make an announcement at the Consumer Electronics Show, not at an auto show. Of course, they're going to be doing that in the auto shows, but the Consumer Electronics Show. That's a big indicator about how important this business is to GM, and how it is important to every manufacturer. So I think it's great that they're talking about it, and they're showing something interesting, and they're getting all generations excited about it, which is great. I think that marketing has been really, really well done. Where I think they're missing the boat is, okay, so what? Now what? What is your vehicle going to offer me that Tesla isn't, that Lucid isn't, that all these other companies aren't? Because once you start searching for an electrical vehicle, you're going to get retargeted, and you're going to get a lot of information, and it's going to be overwhelming. So how do you fix that? How do you separate yourself from all this overwhelming information? And I think that they've lit the candle, but now it's okay, why GM? Why this car? What is it? What's in it for me that is going to get me to the next level where I might consider that car over a Tesla? Because is brand going to win there? I don't know. Do we think of, as consumers, do we think of GM as a car company or a technology company? I think we think of GM as a car company that is really upping their game into technology. But when you think of Tesla, that's a technology company that's making a vehicle. Lucid is a technology company making a vehicle. So that's a big mind shift. So if GM is saying our technology is as good, if not better, than these other companies, I want to know why. What is it that they're doing that's going to make me feel comfortable to put money down on a GM vehicle that's now electric? That's where I think they're missing the opportunity. And maybe it's coming in the future, and maybe it's too young or it's too new to do that because now they're just getting the idea out there. But as consumers start entering this category, you're gonna have to speak to people of why your car is better, what specifically is better about it, and what specifically is it how it fits my needs, who's validating this wonderful technology, and what is the offer that you're going to offer me that I can't get somewhere else. That is very specific direct-to-consumer marketing, that if I get to that point where that offer, you've convinced me on those other things, and I get to that point of where that offer comes, that's where you have to score. That's where you have to get it over the goal line, if you will, because all that other stuff is just working yourself to that goal line to make that offer, to get someone to click, buy, go to a showroom, figure it out. And then the next step, once I'm into that vehicle, make it me comfortable that when I go to the service center with my electrical vehicle from a traditional automotive company, that I'm going to be taken care of. I know that I'm working with really highly skilled technicians that are going to help me with my situations or problems or questions about my electrical vehicle that they've never had to do before, because that's not the business they've been in. And that goes back earlier to the webinar about the mindset of the company and how that conveys to the consumer. So that's my little piece on, who I think is doing a good job here. So anyways, I hope this webinar was informative. I hope you enjoyed the topic and how we went into it. And so if you have any questions about other questions you want to talk about into the webinar, and where we can follow up with some questions, please leave them in the comments. We'd love to get back to you. So our next webinar is talking to the parent company, Cleva, that is the licensee to Kenmore. And we're talking with the Chief Marketing Officer, Dan Bilger at Kenmore. And it's a great interview, and what we really get into is, how do you take this legacy brand, how do you compete with the big companies out there, the Sharks, the Dysons, the Hoovers, the Bissells, all those out there, the legacy brand. But just because you're a legacy brand, how are you different? How do you go about it? And what are they doing differently that is allowing them to get into the marketplace, get market share, get to retail, have strong Amazon sales, and start building momentum? It's a really, really interesting case study, and Dan was a phenomenal interview, and he brings a lot of insight when you're talking about a legacy brand going direct to consumer and competing with the big guys. So that's coming up on Thursday, April 22nd, same time. It's 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, and you'll really enjoy that. So until next time, leave any questions that we could follow up with, And I hope this was a lot of value to you. And we will see you on Thursday, April 22nd. There's a link right now that you can click and register for that. I think you'll enjoy that as well.